All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful Tuesday. On behalf of the Edge Technology Conference and Trellent, we would like to welcome you all to our third session of the 2024 Edge Encores webinar series. This series of webinars brings the four most popular 2024 Edge Technology Conference breakout sessions to the digital space. If you missed Edge this year, or even if you just want to rewatch your favorite session, this is your opportunity to be a part of the conversation. Are you ready for 2025? Well, get ready because the Edge Tech Conference will be going to Las Vegas May 7th through the 9th. Mark your calendars and be on the lookout for more registration information coming soon. So with that, let's get started with our third of the four webinars in the series titled Why Volume is the Greatest of the Big Data Vs. During the session, we'll explore what can happen when credit unions feed into and share access to a rich, anonymized, can never say that word by myself there, an analytically valuable data set. Today, we are excited to have with us Adam Wright, Managing Director of Operations at the Credit Union Data Exchange, also known as CUDX. But before we jump in, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to all after the session concludes. Second, due to the large audience, the phone lines have been muted. And lastly, we want to hear from you. There will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you think of any questions during the duration of this webinar, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box and we will do our best to answer. If you have a question that does not get answered by the end of the webinar, please send our team an email at awright@qdex.com. That will go directly to Adam, our host, and we will get back to you in a timely manner. Thank you all again for being here for this webinar, and without further delay, here's Adam.
Thank you, Cassie, for that great intro. All right, make sure my presenter view is good. All right, here we go. Thanks for joining today. Why are you not moving? There we go. Good afternoon or morning for those of you who are on Pacific or Hawaii time. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. My name is Adam Wright. I'm the Managing Director of CUDX Operations for Trellent. Today I'm going to be talking about why volume is the greatest of the three V's of data, how it can enable valuable insights, and how credit unions are getting access to more data without breaking the bank. Depending on how old you are, you've probably heard of the three R's in primary education. I know maybe younger people don't hear that, but if you think about the three R's being reading, writing, and arithmetic, when it comes to data, we talk about the three V's: volume, velocity, and variety. When it comes to big data, credit unions have sort of pursued each of those three V's with either equal effort or with no specific consideration of priority, up to now or up to the modern era. The emerging availability of generative AI is starting to change that dynamic. That's because AI is a learning technology, and the more data you feed it, the faster it learns and the richer the insights it can produce. Take ChatGPT, for example. That's probably the most common one people are familiar with. It was initially trained on 570 gigabytes of data sets, and that 570 gigabytes was actually created by filtering down 45 terabytes of compressed plain text. So if you think about those of us that are old enough to remember floppy disks, it would take 700,000 floppy disks to hold 1 terabyte of data. So talk about volume, right? Now, if you consider that ChatGPT gets 10 million queries per day, I'm sure that's growing since this content was created. Each one of those queries contains multiple data points. It's almost impossible to think about the size of the corpus of information behind that. But the thing about data volume is it's essentially a prerequisite to variety. So if you think about the second of those V's being variety, the truth is once you have volume, you inevitably end up or usually end up ticking that variety checkbox. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone if you focus on getting more data into your accessible lake or source. The third of those V's, velocity, is a little bit different conversation. It tends to be driven by the type of decisions that you're trying to enable. So if your decision cycle requires real-time or near real-time data to react and make a decision, that's the kind of thing that's going to prompt you to invest in chasing velocity down. So there you go. As credit unions integrate more AI-based tools and technologies, their need for volume is going to rise, allowing AI tools more observations from which to learn, and allowing the credit union to ask richer, more detailed questions of those AI tools to better ensure quality results. So why is this such an important and timely topic for credit unions? As we all know, the primary bragging right of credit unions is their members matter. They're not just an account number, but they're actually seen and known to their credit union. And this is true. I mean, you're right to be proud of this, and that is a true delineator between the credit union movement and larger, more impersonal, I would say, banks that are part of this financial services industry. But as credit unions consolidate and grow, and as the way members interact with credit unions involve relatively fewer and fewer face-to-face interactions in a physical branch, the ability to demonstrate that difference to members is harder and harder to achieve. Larger banks and fintech startups with deep pockets, high technical talent, and bandwidth are leveraging AI tools to create high-quality virtual personalized experiences that challenge this traditional advantage that credit unions have had up to this point. With generative AI, credit unions can offer members the kinds of hyper-personalized experiences that complement those experiences that they can create in the branch and help them continue to compete as this trend becomes more and more true over time, generationally, and with the tools that are out there. What's on the screen here is a real-world example from McKinsey. It shows an example of personalization or hyper-personalization that we're able to enable now. Essentially, if you look at the content on that screen, you go from sort of in the lower left, the email with the blue icon that just says, discover the new experiences with our gold credit card, right? It doesn't say anything individual about the member, and it really doesn't go to any detail about how that product can relate to the needs of the member. In contrast, if you look at the personalized message, which is an SMS, possibly sent in a more timely manner, directly to where the member is at that time, the hello, Jessica, discover the joys of our Black credit card. Perfect for someone who loves indulging in delicacies and exploring the world of cinema. Enjoy double airline miles, airport lounge access, and more. Check it out at your, Bank X Black credit card. Cheers, the sender from your credit union, right? So, this is a good example. This is derived from an actual example, and you can see the kinds of personalized elements that are being worked in here. Addressing the member personally, pulling in information that they likely derive from transaction data or whatever about how that member spends and behaves and what they like. They like eating out at nice restaurants. They like going to the movies, and they must travel and use airport lounges, etc. So we're hyper-personalizing the way that we're engaging with this member. And this type of solution or this type of improved experience is enabled not only by a high volume of data, but by feeding that data into a Gen AI tool that can help generate this type of content. Pulling this off requires a lot of data. And some of that data is going to have to come from outside your credit union walls. So I wanted to tee this up, this example. I'm going to be revisiting this concept of hyper-personalization during this presentation to kind of help illustrate the value of data volume in a way that I think relates to what we're all trying to do in the credit union space, which is know our members and let them know that and create a delineating experience between us and impersonal generic banks, right? So, getting to know members on an individual level, the pressure is on really for credit unions to keep up. We've all seen it. It's difficult to drive new membership. It's difficult to drive engagement and use of credit union products with all of the alternatives that are out there. If you think of SoFi and other lenders that are popping up that are completely different even than traditional banks. But I'm here to say, don't worry. Whether you know it or not, you're probably already on this journey. So some of you may be thinking about the awesome results you've already attained with the data you already have, right? Or you're engaged in some step on this continuum that we typically describe as the analytics maturity curve, right? That goes from management to descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, et cetera, up the curve, right? Credit unions make great strides when they go from basic descriptive analytics to predictive analytics, which is probably where most of you are in your journey today, right? The next step on that journey is prescriptive analytics, which involves feeding data into tools that tell you what to do or perhaps even do them for you. And if you thought you saw meaningful success or improvement by moving from descriptive to predictive analytics, just wait until you start to experience the jump in outcomes from predictive models to prescriptive models. And these will more and more include the use of generative AI tools. There are providers in the market right now who have really good predictive analytic products that don't require huge volumes of data beyond what you're pulling out of your current core or other ancillary systems that you're able to easily connect to, right? Trellance is one of those providers. And great things happen in predictive analytics and can happen with smaller data sets. But even greater things can happen when you jump to the next level and invest in the data volume to support it. And good Gen AI solutions are going to demand that additional volume. So the good news is that it's really a win-win, right? Everything that you've done to this point, your efforts to get where you are currently on this continuum have not been for nothing. Each step builds on the one before. So unlike in the past, perhaps if you invested in an emerging technology and it was quickly superseded by another technology and you're regretting being, early to that market, analytics is not really that way, right? If you've invested in, simple personalization things like segmentation, or you've started to do predictive models like next best product or propensity to churn or whatever, the outcomes from those investments are going to feed what you're going to use to get value out of generative AI. If any of you have played around with ChatGPT or any of the other emerging tools that you can kind of access via the internet now for free or for cheap, you may have noticed something, right? The richer, more specific the information that you provide in your question, the more the result is going to meet your actual needs. So if you think about asking ChatGPT to do something for you for fun, right? Write me a song. Okay, it may spit out a song, and then you further elaborate. Okay, write me a country song. And then maybe write me a country song about heartbreak. And then maybe write me a country song about heartbreak that's written in the style of Buck Owens. Or, of course, please feel free to substitute your own preferences into that example. But by incorporating knowledge about your members that you've derived from your existing or traditional analytics or machine learning, the more effective those Gen AI responses are going to be. So let's explore that relationship between traditional analytics and hyper-personalization in a little more detail. And forgive me, by a little more detail, I mean a lot more detail, right? So I know this is a busy slide. But if you'll indulge me, I like the story that this tells. It is content that was produced in partnership with McKinsey, and it walks us through the levels of personalization. From P0 on the left, P0 representing no personalization, to P5, which is a highest level or the highest level of personalization on the right, in which Gen AI tools have fully personalized one-on-one conversations with your members. We see some steps toward that from maybe where you are or maybe where a credit union that really hasn't started this journey might be on the far left. Let me kind of cover what's in each of these levels very briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit about, where the credit union industry is. Hopefully, you can think about how what you've done so far or what you're working on now may relate to one of these levels. So obviously, no personalization is no personalization. Similar to that example that was in the lower left on that intro slide, where you're just saying, hey, check out our credit card or what have you. Level 1 is simple personalization, the sort of mail merge type thing where you've got a database with someone's name or some other information about them, and you're just plugging that into a pre-written script. That is kind of the lowest level of personalization in which any personalization is occurring. And we walk our way up, right? If you've invested in segmentation and you have some ideas about the differences of your members by their age or their family status, their geography, how they interact with you, the products that they have. You may have different types of scripts or channels or cadences that you use to engage with those members, and that's segment-driven personalization or level P2. It isn't until we get to level P3 where we start to have opportunities to engage with generative AI produced content. So typically the spectrum, once we unlock Gen AI, there's kind of a spectrum of confidence and competence that we need to build before we get to the fully personalized engagement, right? Generally what folks are going to be confident with early on is letting Gen AI produce certain parts of the content that's going to be presented to a member, right? You're going to have a template or a series of templates that you're very confident are on brand for you. They don't include anything that is offensive or hallucinatory or anything like that. But you're just going to plug in pieces into this from Gen AI into this approved script and send that out. So you're sending all that, you're saving all that time, you're retaining a lot of control and not taking much risk, but you're still leveraging some of these Gen AI products to add richness to that interaction and make it more personalized. Level P4, what we call full personalization, is where the Gen AI generates one-on-one messages to the customer with message content, tone, length, hooks, etc., individually tailored for them, but there's still sort of an eye on it, right? You are giving it a left and right bound and not letting it sort of interact in real time. So you're generating a one-way message that is largely populated by generative AI content, but you're not letting it interact with the member. And of course, level 5 is where you have a bot that is either via voice or text interacting live in real time with your member, responding to questions as if it were a representative or a teller or a loan officer for your credit union. Very few credit unions, none that I know of, are at P5, although some do use some chat bots to help route people to members to a person that can help answer their questions, etc. Generally, we're moving along this roadmap with the help, again, of traditional analytics. And ultimately, you have to do this by spending time, right? It takes time, it takes testing, it takes caution, it takes a little bit of faith. A lot of credit unions that are really going down the generative AI path are starting with solutions that are employee facing. So they're letting Gen AI generate content that is informing a person how to engage with the member. So you have that extra filter. That person's going to know not to say something crazy, even if AI says to do it. But the truth is, AI is getting better and better at doing this right, and there are ways to get there, right? Again, all of these, as you move from the spectrum from P0 to P5, require more and more data and more underlying traditional analytics to make each the next step up better and help you serve your members better. So thanks for your indulgence on that busy slide. All right. So how do you unlock the potential for growing your prescriptive analytics capabilities, right? Once you decide to move forward, you're probably going to need partners. Most credit unions are going to need partners. They're not necessarily going to have the expertise, the bandwidth, the best practices, knowledge that they're going to need to successfully move from one level to the next that we described on the previous slide, right? So you're going to need partners for the technology itself. You're going to need advisors, collaborators, consultants that are experts in that industry, and you're going to need data, including from data sources that come from others in the industry or those that partner with the industry. And I want to focus a little bit about data that comes from others in your industry or data from other members of the credit union movement. So the main thing to think about that has moved us to where we are today from a capability standpoint is the tech stack, right? Today's tech stack options essentially offer infinite capacity for storing and computing with your data or whatever data you have access to. And when the best practices are employed, they're typically quite affordable over time, especially when compared to on-prem alternatives with similar capacity or capability. Like cloud services free you from the overhead of maintaining hardware. They seamlessly expand elastically to meet your demand and then shrink back down when you're not using all of that demand. And they employ the best possible security that is up to date and monitored by an army of experts. Now, I don't say that to pretend like breaches don't occur or that it's a zero risk environment. But if you're using good providers who are using best practices, multi-factor authentication, and all the different things that are out there, you can minimize your risk using cloud resources the same way that you have to do it with your on-prem solutions, right? The tools are there, but how can you grow your data beyond what you're pulling out of your core and vendor systems to basically capitalize on this capability that the tech stack provides? So here's where the Credit Union Data Exchange, or CUDX, can become a data resource and a collaborative community of partner credit unions to help us collectively compete with larger banks and fintechs, right? CUDX is a credit union-owned cooperative created to enable credit unions to securely share data and insights from their data with each other. So, what is it? It is a participant-governed common platform for sharing and retrieving data. It is a common portal for use case solutions to share insights with each other. Those solutions are decided upon by councils that are made up of subject matter experts from the individual credit unions participating. It is an enabler for feeding more data into and getting more value from existing tools and talent. And platform aside, it is a community of practice made up of subject matter experts that are sharing insights, asking questions, and just providing that sort of feedback loop. And what would you do? Here's what we did. That kind of insight with each other that only credit unions can get, right? Bank of America and Wells Fargo are not going to share these insights, but the credit unions will. So those are the kind of things that you can gain by participating in the credit union data exchange. That's what it is. This NASCAR slide has the logos of the credit unions and the cooperatives represented on our governing board. So these credit unions and entities are on the Credit Union Data Exchange governing board, includes Michigan State. Of course, Filene and Trellance are enabling partners in this. They themselves are credit union-owned cooperatives. And then the other credit unions, Intera, MAPS, Visions, Verity, Suncoast, and Directions. So we have representation on the board of credit unions that are large and small and in multiple geographies. We've got West Coast, Southeast, Midwest, you name it, represented on the board and in the other members of the Credit Union Data Exchange, which gives us not only different points of view, but also rich information about our members. So CUDX, a little bit more about CUDX. It was born and socialized as an idea in the spring of 2023 at a Filene event, right? The story went at the time that one of the fellows, I don't know how familiar you all with Filene, probably everyone on this call is, but they were doing, academic quality research facilitated by a well-known business school professor with the cooperation of 3 different credit unions that were on the same core and had the same origination platform and everything, who said, yes, we would be happy to throw our data in with these other credit union data and allow it to be used to aid in backing up the findings of this academic level study that Filene was producing. But what they found was, even though they're all in the same core, they all had the same origination, et cetera, making that data work together because of the customizations involved and the connections and everything, they spent a lot of time and work trying to get that data put together, and it challenged the completion of that study. And basically the question that came out of it was, wouldn't it be nice if something like this already existed? And in conversations between, Mark Meyer of Filene and Tom Davis of Trellance, basically said, well, we could build this. And that's kind of the idea that this grew out of. So that was April or May of 2023. We got a lot of traction early on, and a lot of credit unions expressed interest in that. And then we kind of go into a red tape phase. We've made a decision to build this thing. And since then, we've seated a governing board. We've completed 90% of that red tape, such as creating bylaws, member and investor agreements, council charters, some recruiting. We've recruited up to 30 credit unions so far to participate in this. We formed advisory councils and started convening them starting in November of last year. So they drive the use case development roadmap. They make the governance decisions. They make the security and privacy rules, et cetera, with just advice from Filene and Trellance to help. And we've designed and implemented the initial use case. We've onboarded credit union data, and we've entered the MVP phase with the CUDX platform. That'll go live, scheduled for November of 2024. So just in a couple of months here, we've already created the initial use case, which is a member KPI dashboard. We've got volunteer POC participant data ingested in that, and we're making it available to the participants to get their feedback, work through bugs, et cetera. And after 90 days with that, the platform's going to go live. And of course, we'll keep walking through additional use cases at that time. So some of those use cases here, the initial list of use cases that we're working toward were identified in a council workshop. We convened them in Tampa in November of 23. We identified and prioritized 17 analytics use cases. Those include various data visualizations, predictive models, and a couple of true AI applications. To support all of these use cases, a data model was created that only requires about 125 critical data elements in it. So I know you've probably heard of efforts in the past to create shared data resources, et cetera, but because they're difficult and because of some of the challenges that I mentioned before on the initial filing study, you get into this kind of boiling the ocean cycle, and it becomes very, very hard to complete, right? We have taken those 17 use cases and focused only on the critical data elements required for those, and maybe a couple of others that we anticipate needed in the future to make this very feasible for a credit union to produce the data necessary to participate here. In many cases, the existing internal processes at a credit union can just be cloned or adapted slightly to produce the majority of this data. You're probably already doing some analysis with some of the data that comes out of your core or your loan origination or what have you, or your transaction providers. And we can help you retool that to fit this data model and get value now instead of waiting years to get everybody to conform to a much more complex model. One of the things I like to bring up that as CUDX grows, the data insight pool created by combining all this data is going to be increasingly valuable. Now, the way that the architecture is built is that PII and PII adjacent data that you would upload goes into a private locker that's visible only to you. And everything that gets pulled into the combined set strips out all of those data elements and does not include it. If you don't feel comfortable uploading that at all of those fields are completely optional. And if you need to take the results of what CUDX provides and you want to tie it to who that member is, you can do that on your side in your own systems, and nobody at CUDX that's working with your data would be able to see that. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with all of that. So once we get all this combined, even in an anonymized way, this insight pool is going to be increasingly valuable. You know, not just to the participants of CUDX, but also to merchants or vendors, other third parties that want to know how your members are behaving, right? If you know how people are spending money at various stores and their competitors, for example, Lowe's versus Home Depot, they might be interested in this data to better understand how they compete and where they compete well, et cetera, right? Just as an example. When the time is right, CUDX has the power and flexibility to monetize this data, to sell it to approved buyers. All buyers would have to be approved by the board, and you would have to, all the participants have to consent to their data being included to what's sold. But once approved, that type of monetization effort will create income streams that A, offset the costs of participating in CUDX and potentially create non-interest income streams return to the credit unions on a pro rata basis. So there's a lot of potential upside here, and we're already working on making this real. Finally, data governance in CUDX. The rules and the procedures around data governance, privacy, and security are all devised by an advisory council made up of subject matter experts nominated from within the participating credit unions themselves. So it is self-driven, unlike any other solution that's out there. This isn't being built by a vendor for sale back to the individual credit unions. It is of credit unions for credit unions. The councils include representation from CUs with the full gamut of viewpoints about data privacy. So, if you pull up your member privacy agreements, they can vary fairly drastically from what a typical agreement says, with verbiage like, we share your data with partners and affiliates and you cannot opt out. Two, other credit unions have very strict agreements that say we will never share your data with anyone, essentially, right? So we've tried to design this. We're designing our analytics tools and our data models to work, as I said before, without any PII or PII adjacent data if a credit union doesn't want to upload that even into their own private locker. The philosophy essentially is that useful analytics and metrics just don't require being able to identify, who the person is behind the row of data from which those insights are derived. So we think you'll find that you can put you and your leadership at ease about privacy risk while still making our case for why you should participate in CUDX. And so I would invite you to reach out to me if you're interested to find out more. You can reach out to me by emailing me, as Cassie said at the top of the hour. You can email me at awright@qdex.com, or you can go to our website. There's a lot of content in there, FAQs. There's a prospectus in there, and there's actually a survey to fill out if you're interested in joining. You can do it right there in the website. And you can, if you don't want to write that down, the QR code there will take you to qdex.com. So with that, I would like to wrap and open up the floor for questions.
Yes, absolutely. Adam, thank you so much for that awesome presentation. For anybody who does have a question, there should be a Q&A box that you can see via Zoom. You can use that to, kind of submit your questions. We'll answer those live. To get us started, I do have a question from me, Adam, just until we can see if somebody else can, ask a question. But I was kind of curious, does a larger data pool with data on many people kind of translate into a more personalized messaging with an individual member? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really comes down to the way that models make decisions about what's predictive of a behavior or an outcome. So the main thing that I like to point out, I guess, as an example of this is even if your credit union is large, right? You've got 100,000 plus members. Clearly, you could build, if you have the expertise, you could build a predictive model that gives you significant lift for saying who's likely to be in the market for, say, an auto loan or mortgage or any one of your key products and do pretty well. The challenge that even a lot of large credit unions run into is that many of them are geographically based, or they are based in a particular seg, like an industry that they serve more than others. So the true nationwide credit union with millions of members is kind of a rare bird. So the example that I like to pull out is like, okay, you could build a predictive model that, in the aggregate gives you lift and predicts, who's likely to do something. That serves you. But even if you're a credit union that's large, if your geography is, say, the Midwest, that certain counties around, say, Detroit or another metropolitan area in the Midwest, for example, you still have members who have retired and gone to Florida or have moved for work to other parts of the country, or what have you. And you are unlikely. It is unlikely that those models are going to do a good job of applying to those members. So even though your models in the aggregate provide lift for you, they probably are informative most for the people that look a lot like all your other members. If you combine data from credit unions around the country and you get information and insights about members from different geographies and different career fields, et cetera, by combining your data with other credit unions that have more of those members, you're way more likely to have models that are going to feed tools that are going to actually drive better personalization for those members that don't kind of look like everybody else. And that's really what we're here to do, right? If we go back to the beginning of the presentation, our claim to fame is that we know our members and we know who they are when they walk through the door. They're not just a member number. So that really is the primary advantage of how a larger data set provides more opportunity to personalize.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, somebody's asked a question here that I think will be a really good piggyback off of that. Kind of with everything that you just said, is there a possibility for regional bias within that data? And they kind of gave an example. So they're saying if there was an increased housing cost somewhere in the US, could it increase a predicted financial stressor somewhere else?
Right. So it's almost a two-sided question. So from the standpoint that bias is bad, the kind of bias you're talking about, for example, the home prices in Hawaii rising astronomically and some of the other places, I think a good example is like in Austin, Texas. Home prices have gone up dramatically because of people moving from Silicon Valley as jobs became more and more remote or companies moving for tax reasons. And so I think the question about bias was, by including a lot of data from a region impacted by that, you could actually create false predictions for other parts of the country where that type of trend isn't necessarily occurring. And that's absolutely right. So that's one of the reasons why if you have a broader set of data that includes members from other parts of the country, the trend in one geography can apply to the prediction about people in that geography, and the ML and AI tools can learn that that isn't a universal trend, and they can help compensate for some of the bias that might occur if you used a smaller set that was I guess overweighting some of those reasons that would create that bias. So hopefully that makes sense as an off the cuff response to that. But ultimately, yes, that bias could occur. And yes, there are ways to compensate for it. And the more data that you have with the variety that we talked about, the better you're going to do at compensating for that. And of course, with volume tends to come the variety that you would need.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Hopefully, it also makes sense to our question asker there. We got one coming in. Somebody says, how do we ensure members that our participation in CUDX won't put their data at risk? I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, I think that's one that we have to answer over and over again. And um, you know, definitely understand everybody's concerned about that. So the primary thing that we're doing is there's everyone with access to the CUDX data portal. So there's a credit union has access to their own locker, their own private locker that nobody else can access except for the engineers at CUDX that need to facilitate it through the layers of raw to ODS to an insights layer. Only you can see that information, and it is protected with the best in class security features in Azure and Snowflake, et cetera, with MFA applied and password protection and everything else that's going to go on. The other part of this is everything that's pulled into the combined set that allows us to see broader trends across the whole industry, allows you to compare your credit union to the entirety of the rest of the group. All of that combined data includes no PII or PII adjacent data. So there's no email, there's no phone, there's no name, there's no birthday, nothing like that. We need to know, maybe your state and county and how old you are. We don't need your address and your birthday, right? To generate meaningful insights and usable predictive models. You can reverse engineer, if you've provided us anonymized data with a hashed member ID or encrypted member ID, and you want to use that in your operations, when you pull that back into your systems, you can reverse look up, the who on your own system if you decide, or if your member privacy agreement requires you to do it that way. So that's part of the way that we protect everything right there. The other way really is you have, or the participating credit union also maintains tight control over who they want to have access to everything. So if there is, I mentioned data monetization. So if there's an opportunity to sell data, even in an anonymized form, to a third party that's approved by the board, meets all the criteria, and they're going to pay for this data. If your credit union does not want your data included, even in a anonymized way in that transaction, it won't be. And then you're not included in any revenues that are produced by that. But the ultimate answer is that the data is your data. You always own it. You always consent to how it's used.
Yeah, awesome, Adam. I know that security is a huge, subject in the credit union industry as a whole right now. So I guess that's definitely top of mind for people right now, especially with this type of subject. So thank you for answering that. So I don't see any more questions that come from the audience, but I do have one more for you, Adam. And my question is, what are some of the most exciting things that you've observed about CUDX so far?
There's a couple of things. The uh, the ease with which we can pull data in from credit unions that have, certain cores, et cetera, particularly if they're on a Trellance data warehouse already, or one of the other Trellance products. One of the advantages of Trellance being the technical provider for QDEX, at least in the near term, is the accelerators that exist already there that Trellance is essentially donating as part of their investment in this, just to be a thought leader in the industry. Um, the thing that strikes me, I think, most is something that's not even technical about QDEX, as I've mentioned a couple of times in this meeting, that we've convened these councils. Three councils. We have a research and innovation council focused on use cases that are going to be valuable, data and analytics use cases that'll drive value, to make sure that QDEX is designed to enable value early and often throughout its evolution. We have a data governance council that's concerned with not just the traditional aspects of how governance tools work, like data glossaries and source to target mapping. What's the golden source for this particular element, et cetera, but also sort of the architecture questions. These kinds of tools work best together to enable these types of solutions. And then the last council is a privacy risk and compliance council made up of mostly like CISO expertise from within the credit unions. So we've got these groups of people that are excited about the idea of QDEX, about sharing data and insights. We get them together in person about quarterly, certainly 3 or 4 times a year in Tampa or in some other location. And we sit and we workshop in these rooms. And then we also meet virtually, every other week or when needed. And what I've seen is as we start getting data pulled together and there's an observation like, okay, I can now see how well I'm attracting younger members or older members or members with good credit or B credit or C credit or whatever, compared to how the group is doing, right? And, when you get these people together, if you say, we're having trouble attracting younger members, we've noticed we have an aging population, for example, what are you doing to attract younger members? Somebody else will tell them what they're doing, right? So you get this community of practice that shares ideas and says, hey, we tried this way, and it worked great for us. Maybe you could try it. Those kinds of ideas are feeding into the features and the solutions that QDEX is producing for its participants. And you would never get that again from people in a for-profit industry, right? If it's better for the members, credit unions will share those ideas with each other. And that's the most exciting to me, is this sort of community of expertise and open sharing of ideas that really makes this fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. I'm really excited to see the future of QDEX and how it really has an impact here on the credit union industry. With that, I think we're ready to conclude.